Back here, worst seats in the house. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Thanks to the many, many people here that have shown up to Elsie's on this beautiful Wednesday night, where it's about 40 degrees warmer than yesterday. Although, man, it feels cold outside, even though it's like 20.
Cold, but a lot warmer.
Yeah,
warm
that's
enough.
true.
I'll be walking the dogs tonight after midnight for my late night walk.
Yeah, I did while you were on the road. I did ask Margot what Phil and Stanley think of the weather, and Phil apparently is not a fan.
No, they're not. I made them go, I think maybe the first day of kind of that recent cold stretch, and about halfway through the walk, they both stopped and just looked at me like, "Are you kidding? Our feet are freezing. Let's go."
Yeah.
So then I left. They don't get walked during the winter when I'm not around, but tonight we'll be back out on the trail.
That's awesome. Glad that they will get their walk in. February 5th is our next live show. That's at Splitrocks. That'll be our first February show of the next month. We'll have 4. 3 will be recorded. 1 while he's in Costa Rica. 1 while I'm up at the. I'll do a solo one when I'm at the Four Nations, and I'll be in either Montreal or Boston when he's in Costa Rica doing that show, and then we'll have 1 when we get back. And then we'll have 2 live shows in March, so pay attention to where those are on our social media or on the upcoming podcast, but they'll be either at Splitrocks, Tuttle's, or Elsie's. Feel free, if you are standing, to sit wherever you want. We have a microphone up here. If you want to ask any question, come on up. You can get some free merchandise here, whether it's a Worst Seats in the House t-shirt, a toque, or a... which I'm styling right now. Doesn't it look good?
Those look good.
And
I was just thinking that was what you read my mind.
and there you go. I won't do it to you, but Brooks Bollinger, I just ran into him, and he wanted me to like mess up your hair tonight, but he also wanted me to say hello. So that was cool. He's like, he used to coach at or he asked if you coached at Tino. I'm like, no, he's since retired.
I have retired. We overlapped 1 year when he was at Hill, and then when he went to Cretin, we ended up, we had some friends that were, in fact, who's now our defensive coordinator, Totino Grace, was the DC at Cretin at the time when he was the coach. So we overlapped at a couple clinics where we spent some time together, and really a great guy. I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, it was cool chatting with him. All right, let's talk about the Wild. Really cool news coming in Thursday's game against the Utah Hockey Club, where Kirill Kaprizov and Jared Spurgeon will return after much longer than either of them wanted to be out. Kirill's missed 12 games. Jared's missed 9. They were on their regular lines today. Kirill with Rossi and Zuccarello. Spurgeon with Chisholm because Brodin's out of the lineup. So Middleton will be with Faber. Merrill will be with Bogosian. David Jiricek had to be sent down today just to make the math work. They were going to be $820,000 over the cap until once they tomorrow activate Kirill Kaprizov off long-time injury reserve. Well, a lot of Wild fans have been, wondering, well, do you put Travis Dermott on waivers? The problem is Travis only makes $775. They're $820 over the cap. So to send Travis on waivers now, you'd have to also send another player down, a league minimum guy. That obviously would be Devin Shore because they need Ohgren here with Johansson out of the lineup. Well, the problem is they got a game against Calgary coming up, and then they have the 5-game road trip. You need an extra forward for that. So Jiricek had to be the guy that goes down. The last couple games, he really showed himself well. I talked to John Hines, both in front of the media today, but then even on the side, and the word he used is like, I am jacked right now with what we see from him. Obviously, he's got things to work on in his own zone, going up against breakouts, coming out of his own zone. But right now, they see a lot of the good things. And at 21 years old, you hope that he'll just continue to improve in the minors.
Yeah, and I'm jacked to be getting closer to the regular lineup.
Yeah.
Wes and I were talking after when we were heading to the bus in Nashville after that game, and he just looked at me and he said, it's getting so exhausting calling games where it's not the Wild lineup, where the story is who's out, how much longer is he out, how are they juggling lines to make this fit, how are they trying to make do on the blue line with so many pieces out. And I agree with him. It just gets draining, and not to mention the fact that you're just not watching an NHL team play anymore. And then after they won the game in Colorado, and we were getting on the bus to leave there to go to the airport, and it was like I still am a little bit in disbelief how they won that game and how dominant they were. And Jiricek was a part of that. I think he's got a lot of work left to do. And yes, I have had those same conversations with John Hines, and there are things in his offensive game that are legit. he can shoot the puck. And Wes made a comment during the broadcast that was the same thing I was thinking. He missed the net one time in Colorado, but the bang with which the puck hit the end glass, Wes just turned to me, he said, that just sounded different. And now I get it. It was a puck that missed the net, but it's like saying that a guy, you heard the crack of the bat on a foul ball or something, and you think this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. Not going that far, but it's just different. The puck comes off his stick differently. He made the great play on the wall on Trennan's goal in that game. I think he's shown some flashes of the offensive skill that made him the 6th overall pick. And at the same time, there's still 6 plays a night where you scratch your head and say, whoa, bud, where are you headed on this one in his own zone? And Hines has shared those same comments. So I think it was exciting. His best game was his last one. That's a good sign. Now go down, hone the skills, play a ton of minutes, polish up all that, the parts of the game that need work, and then come back. And maybe when he comes back next time, he's ready to stick in the NHL.
And we're all like it, not just fans, but all of us that watch the team. Like, you see a guy play that well in Colorado, at least in the offensive side of the ice. And same thing, Ohgren gets 2 assists after being a -4 in Nashville, and you think, all right, these guys are here to stay. Get rid of Goshen, get rid of Merrill, get rid of this guy. That it does not work that way, and it won't continue to work. Like, I remember somebody on Twitter actually said to me, "These guys are here to stay. They're going to get rid of this guy and this guy tomorrow." I'm like, "You want to bet?" Like, that's just not the way it works in pro sports, and they're not just going to, just because Jiricek had one good game, all of a sudden just say, John Merrill, you're out the door. Zach Bogosian, you're out the door.
Let's back up even there for a minute. John Merrill was better than David Jiricek in that game.
Yep.
Jiricek made a play on a goal that Merrill will never make. Merrill made 15 plays in his own zone, little stick plays, coverage plays, starting breakout passes. He's been so much better this year than he was last year that, I mean, there were probably 15 plays in that game that Merrill made that Jiricek has not yet made. So, yes, Jiricek made a couple offensive plays, but Johnny Merrill's been a huge part of this club and has really played well in the absence of other defensemen.
Yeah, John, his first pass is usually, as long as he's not fumbling it, he's one of the Wild's best first pass guys on stretch passes. And
he's got their defensive zone coverage down so well that the little plays, the touch pass behind the net, because he knows that if I'm covered this way or I'm pressured this way, this is where the puck goes. He's been so efficient in those areas that it's made him look quicker. It's made him look more efficient than even he really is.
And these guys are young kids. Like Liam Ohgren is 20 years old. He will go to the minors when they're healthy, assuming they eventually get healthy. And they never seem to just get completely healthy. But if Johansson comes back and they are healthy, Ogren's got to go down. That's just the way the cap works. And that's just a fact of life right now. So the lines are starting to look much more NHL-like, where all of a sudden Trenyan, one game after the winning goals, back on the 4th line, just because they want to keep, because Ohgren played well with Gaudreau and Foligno the other day. They want to go there. Hartman's starting to play better. He's back up on the 2nd line with Eric Sinek and Boldy, and then Rossi back with Zuccarello and Kaprizov. If you didn't read my article today, give it a read. A really funny lead, the first 8 graphs of me just shooting the breeze with Matt Zuccarello, and Kirill Kaprizov comes into the locker room in the middle of this, and Matt's just made up this story that Kirill just walked into their meeting today and basically is like, "Guys, I'm back," and then everybody went crazy and jumped on him, and total sarcasm, never happened, but Kirill was just sitting there shaking his head at Zuccarello, exaggeratingly telling me the story, and I use the lead as sort of an intro to the story to also tell people this is kind of what we deal with every time we interview Zuccarello. We have to parse through every one of his quotes to figure out, all right, what was real, what's sarcastic, what's just a joke. And in between, you get really good quotes out of it. So Zuccarello was really funny in that story. That Nashville game was interesting because I know that because they got beaten handily, everybody just thought that they went into that game and didn't have their eyes on the ball because they were looking for redemption against Zach LaRue. But I really felt the fights had nothing to do with that. They went in there, they made their point, then they turned the page, and unfortunately they had just a horrendous beginning of the second period that cost them the game.
Yeah, and I thought their defensive zone coverage was off, maybe as far as it's been off in any single game this year. And we had some numbers that we looked at during the Colorado broadcast where it was among their worst games in terms of chances given up. There were a couple
and you
spots.
could start to see that in the first period.
You could.
Yeah.
And there were a couple spots where a save could have helped them, and they didn't get it. But it was more about their structure. And that was the point I was making with the conversation I had with Wes, was when we were walking to the bus and you say, well, but look at the minutes and the guys you're leaning on to try to stop these guys. And it's a Nashville team that's playing better right now, and their big guns are playing. They just came from 5-1 down to win a game last night. First 4-goal comeback in their franchise history. And it's because their big guys are starting to play like their big guys, Stamkos and Marchessault and Forsberg. And Minnesota's trying to play against them with a third pair that was Dermott and Jiricek. And where I turned to Wes at one point during a commercial break, and I said, if I had told you even a month ago, even after we traded for David Jiricek, that this is the defensive lineup that you'd be running out here tonight, that you'd have Merrill and Bogosian as your 3-4 and Dermott and Jiricek as your 5-6, I mean, you would have gotten laughed out of the building. And they just were overmatched by a Nashville team that played pretty well that night, played with some desperation. And we had talked with Andrew Burnett at length that morning. That was really a game for them that was a statement game. They've got a schedule coming up that's relatively forgiving. And for a team that's buried, that was the one they had to have. If they got that one, they had a chance to go on a little run and maybe get themselves back within striking distance of a playoff spot, and they got it.
I watched that San Jose Nashville game yesterday, and they were down 4 and wound up winning the game in regulation.
Like they're down 5-1, the first 4-goal comeback in franchise history.
Yeah, like to me, they had to get the Wild game, but that, like, I actually think they're about to go on a run. Like I agree with you on the schedule, but a couple of weeks ago we were like, it's not going to happen. I actually think they're gonna.
Yeah, it could. Right now would be the time. And they're playing better. It's 5 out of 7. Now it's 6 out of 8 with the win last night. And they're starting to look like some people thought they'd look. I still don't think they're built the way they were built last year when they had their run at the end of the year. But, there's a team that went 18 games without a regulation loss last year. And they've got the goaltender. Yeah. They've got the number 1 D-man in Roman Josi to do it. And now they just have to find a way to get their third and fourth lines to play the way they were playing last year when they were such a handful to play against.
Yeah, I'm curious if they continue to get 2 or 3 more wins here, if all of a sudden Barry Trotz looks to add that center. That clearly is what they're lacking on that team. Then they go to Colorado. This is why you should never bet sports. Minus 230 favorites, I think, the Avalanche were. And then the Wild go in there and pretty much outplay them for the most part the entire game. I was talking to Eric Sinek about this today. He played 25-43 and served 6 full minutes of penalties. So almost 32 of that minutes of that 60-minute game, Eric Sinek
was not on the bench.
I mean, it's just crazy.
And that was a night where John Hines juggled his lines a little bit to make sure that he made it harder for Jared Bednar to get McKinnon shifts against somebody other than Eric Sinek, because he knew that he'd want to play his scorers against Minnesota's Zuccarello and Boldy combo. So he said, I'm going to put Eric Sinek with him, and that way you want to get your scorers against mine, well, you're going to have to do it against Eric Sinek. And for the second time in a row, when the teams met here, even though Colorado won the game 6-1, at 5-on-5, Minnesota was pretty damn good in that game. In fact, they outchanced them in the game 19-9 overall. But it was just that the Minnesota didn't get good goaltending that night. McKinnon cashed in on the 2 chances he had, 1 assist, 1 goal. And before you know it, things got upside down and got away from him. But for the most part, at even strength, I thought the Wild defended him pretty well in the game in St. Paul, and they followed it up by doing the same thing to him in Denver. But he's a guy that's what Minnesota's been missing with Kaprizov on the side, is he gets 1 chance and goes down the slot and scores, and all of a sudden that game was 1-1, and you felt like, this is a little bit of a tipping point. But Minnesota came out in the third period and absolutely controlled the first 5 or 6 minutes of that third period, took a 2-goal lead, and then was able to hang on. Great
goaltending from Marc-Andre Fleury in that game. One question we didn't ask John today, and he's always forthcoming with his goaltending, but we didn't ask who the goalie is against Utah. I wonder if they come back with Flower, have Gustafsson, if I remember correctly, his numbers are superb against Calgary, and then you come back on the second of a back-to-back with Flower in Chicago. Do you think that's how they go, or do you think they give Gus the game. He has not played in a while, obviously.
If it's me, I play Fleury.
Yeah.
He's been really good, and I don't know why you'd go away from him right now. And I know that they were planning to go back to Gus originally for that second game on the road trip in Colorado, but then when he was sick and he traveled the whole off day game with no morning skate and decided to go Fleury again in Denver. But the way Fleury played, I think he earned another start.
And the other thing is, if you remember when we were in Utah, Gus was not very good. That was sort of the beginning of his really downfall stretch. So
I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, Fleury's played great. Every other guy in the lineup we talk about, if he plays well, he stays where he is or gets more opportunity. Why not do the same thing in goal? Even though Gus has been your guy, Fleury's been great. So play him in this game and split the back-to-backs and then reevaluate.
Yep, 19 goals in Gus's last 4 starts, but we haven't seen him in a while because of the illness. The other reason, like you brought it out, what he was doing with Eric Sneck, putting him up there with Zuccarello and Boldy, right? But the other thing is, I wonder is, like, I think Jared Bednar, after watching that Nashville game, was looking at that Eric Sneck, Hartman, and Ohgren line and just be like, I am going to give them a steady diet of McKinnon and John realized I better change something because that line really struggled against Nashville, as did Bogosian.
How about the turnaround for Ohgren? He goes -4 in Nashville and then 2 assists and a +3 in Denver a couple nights later.
He just looks much more confident.
He does. I thought he was great in Denver.
Yeah,
I'm not so certain. I mean, I know you just said, like, hey, as soon as Johansson's back, he's going back down. If he plays like he did the other night, I wouldn't be shocked if all of a sudden it was earlier in the year they didn't want him playing on the 4th line. But if he plays that well, I'm not sure why you wouldn't at least consider keeping him around. Now, he's got to. Well, but you could send down your extra forwards, or your Shore. You could even send down a Husnadinov or somebody like that. If he plays as well as he did in Denver, that's all I'm saying. It's not a. I thought he was terrific in that game, and not just because he was on the score sheet. I thought his speed was a factor. His shot was a factor. Yep. He just looked like a guy that looked like he belonged in the NHL.
Yeah. Obviously, cap will have a lot to do with the Ohgren. You got to factor in Ogren's bonuses too. Like there's a lot that goes into the cap calculations right now, and contracts always rule the roost. But usually something happens by the time. We always talk like, what are they going to do with this and this and this? They never get fully healthy. Yeah. Something always happens.
Well, how many questions have you had about what are they going to do with all these defensemen now? Well, this year should be the reason why you never ask that question again. Right. Just when you think you have enough, go get another one, because where they found themselves this year at a time where everybody thought they had a glut, too many defensemen in the prospect system, and now all of a sudden they were picking up one guy in waivers, making a trade for another guy just to get 6 defensemen in your lineup.
And it's going to be interesting what happens this offseason. They're going to have to make a decision on whether or not they qualify and re-sign Declan Chisholm. But, you can't just assume that Zev Boyum is just going to come in, make the team right away. Like, he's a very different player than Brock Faber. Brock Faber was older when he came out. He was more pro-ready when he came out, bigger, different role, all that stuff. Like, there's no guarantee that Zev, even if he made the team next year, is going to wind up needing time in the minors. So they're going to need defensemen and have to make those decisions. Obviously, they got Jiricek and Bogosian's coming back. Players like that. I know Joe Smith's going to be doing a big story on Zev Boyum in the next week or so. He sat down with him. He actually hung out with him the day after the game. Unfortunately, Zev couldn't come to the game in Denver because they had practiced at the exact same time on that Monday. But Joe stayed a little extra in Denver and got together with him, and is going to be doing a really, really big story. Wanted to talk to you about the whole McDavid situation. Again, we talked about officiating ad nauseum last week. I know that, we talked a lot about the Connor McDavid elbow on Marcus Johansson, but the reality is that Vancouver game, one of the 2 refs, by the way, same ref as we talked about last week. Here McDavid is getting, basically, what Connor Garland's trying to do there. There's 20 seconds left in the game. He's just like, who cares if I take a penalty? I'm just not going to let Connor McDavid beat us right now. So he just decides to wrestle him. And finally, no arm goes up. Connor loses his temper and cross-checks him right in the face. Tyler Myers then did the same thing to Evan Bouchard. Both of them get 3-game suspensions. But you and I talk about this a lot, about stars in the NHL just not getting the benefit of doubt from officials. And, I want to watch Connor McDavid on the ice, not Connor Garland.
Well,
and we
right.
want to watch Kirill Kaprizov on the ice, not get, have to drag guys to the net and all this stuff. And it just seems like this is the one league that allows, lesser players to sit there and take advantage of stars. And finally, Connor clearly snapped that week.
But to go back, I also think there are times where guys like McDavid, as the elbow to Johansson's chin as an example, are allowed, they get away with stuff like that because they think, well, Connor McDavid would never do that. Well, he did. It was a cheap shot. He cheap shotted Johansson. He knowingly threw his elbow out to hit him in the head, and knocked him out of the lineup for, I'm not saying he was trying to hurt him, but he for sure was trying to hit him in the head, and he succeeded. And that should have been a suspendable play. It would have been for most players in the league. And
I don't know about we talked about this last week. I think we both agree
for sure.
Penalty.
Right.
I still don't think it was a normal suspension.
No, but it was a penalty for certain. And now in this case, yes, I don't know how officials stand there and watch as Connor Garland climbs on top of Connor McDavid for 15 seconds. You are there to officiate the game, not to decide when the rule book should be enforced. Enforce the rule book.
Yeah.
That was a penalty. And there were a couple of those that we saw in the Wild game in Denver. The Middlestad hit was interference. 100%. Jakub Lauko was skating, looking the other direction. The puck's nowhere to be found, and Middlestad hits him. Now, inadvertent or not, it's interference. Call interference. And in this case, they allow this to go on so long that McDavid does lose his mind. But McDavid is human and therefore needed to be suspended for that. It was a vicious cross-check to the head.
Yeah.
That's without a doubt, that's a suspension. And I've heard some other people talk about the fact that why do we want to see Connor McDavid suspended? Well, I don't care if you want to see him suspended or not. He cross-checked a guy in the head. That's a suspension.
Yeah.
And it can't matter who you are if you do something that dumb. I wish the official would have called Garland in the first place. And yeah, we'd all rather watch McDavid play than Garland. But the bottom line is they didn't call a penalty that doesn't make a cross-check to the head. Okay.
To your point on and we see it so much in the league. I don't understand refs that just watch this stuff happen. We saw it in Vegas. Boldy nails Mark Stone with the cleanest hit imaginable, but super hard. And the referee, Graham Skilcher, just allows Zach Whitecloud to go up and attack Boldy. And Boldy got hurt on the play, went to the bench in discomfort and things like that. And he's just watching it happen, and nothing is called.
Well, there's that. And the other part that drives me crazy is that they allow some retaliation. Then when the retaliation finally gets to a level that they don't
they take them both.
Now they'll take you both. Well, you had already decided you were going to let the first hit go.
Yeah.
Now, just because you watched this guy punch him in the head 4 times, now you're going to decide that, okay, on the 4th punch, that now makes the hit that happened 15 seconds ago a penalty.
Yeah.
That's just, it's asinine to me. If the first hit was a penalty, call it a penalty. If you decide to let it go, then the retaliation can be called by itself.
Yep, agree with you.
Hockey isn't the only thing happening on the ice, and as lakes are freezing over, it's time for ice fishing. OnX Fish offers the most comprehensive fishing tools for increasing your confidence and success on the hard water. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hotspots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Save smarter and grow your funds faster with a certificate from Royal Credit Union. Royal's 4.25% 9-month certificate has no minimum opening balance and a locked-in rate for a guaranteed return at maturity. Open a 4.25% APY 9-month certificate at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 12/5/24, insured by NCUA.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819.
Leighton, first question of the show.
I'm going to give a contrarian take on the Garland thing. So, it was 6-on-5, right? I think so. Oilers got the puck. Why not just take McDavid out? Because they're not going to get an extra attacker if they call a penalty.
Right.
They're probably not going to touch the puck to get a whistle.
Right.
And you take McDavid
this
out.
Is actually, and this is one thing that I plan to talk to the league about when I'm at the GM's meetings and the GMs about, is that to me should be, because to your point, like Connor Garland was genius there. Like, who cares? There's 20 seconds left. He knows that it's a delayed penalty. So even if they put the arm up, unless Edmonton's throwing the puck away, they're not going to get a whistle. Like, to me, at that point, the refs should be allowed on that play to just blow it dead and give the Oilers an offensive zone face-off power play with 20 seconds left. When you know that is what the other player is thinking of doing, because he realizes that, well, who cares? The game's over. It was kind of when Bogosian was just burying guys. At least he did it sort of cleanly, but it was the same thing as jailhouse rules. Like, to me, that's one where if I think the league should allow, if you're calling a penalty and you're Wes McCauley and Chris Lee there, that you should be able to just blow it dead. Because to your point, and that's what a lot of people have made, is that essentially, it's the butterfly effect. You don't know what's going to happen, but essentially they're saying, well, he still would have cross-checked him in the face because there wouldn't have been a whistle anyway. And so I just think that they should be able to blow it dead there and not, if you know it.
I think that's a tough one because
but it's the same thing as
judge. I know what your point is, but let's just say they decide to blow it dead and the team didn't want it because they thought they had a scoring chance. I think you'd run it's a tough line to there are ways teams can get a whistle, throw the puck into the goaltender, right, and force him to either freeze it or play it or something. I mean, I just think you open a door for allowing some subjectivity for referees.
But that happens. I mean, it's a totally different thing, apples and oranges. But, there's intentional offsides is a rule where a linesman makes a judgment call that, like, he did that intentionally. It's going back to the other zone. And so they do allow subjectivity or guesswork from officials. But to your point, you're right. Like, Draisaitl's got the puck in the circle. If they blow that puck dead, Draisaitl will be like,
he's going to lose his mind.
Yeah, right. You're right. So, I mean, there's really no easy answer.
And I want to make it clear, I'm not upset with Connor Garland. I'm upset with the referee who let it happen without calling it. If I'm Connor Garland, have at it. We've seen so many other guys do the same thing. How many times do we watch Alex Pietrangelo hammering away at Wild players in the final seconds in front of the net, knowing that worst case scenario, I take a penalty, but there's 10 seconds left. Maybe it doesn't get called, and if it does, they get a 10-second power play. Who cares? So, I think it's I'm not going to say a smart play, but a shrewd play by Connor Garland. It just should have been called.
Question.
For Jiricek, when he came over, much was made about his skating. How would you say in the small sample size that his skating is?
Well, I think in the offensive zone, clearly, I made a joke on Twitter the other day that it was a tough day for the Jiricek can't skate crowd. I think a lot of it's because of his size and his hunched overness that he looks awkward. I mean, his crossovers going backwards sometimes could be, hairy, but I don't think this guy can't skate. And I certainly don't think that Andy Ness can't work with him for a summer and make him a lot better. Like, I trust Bill Guerin, Chris Kelleher, and all their scouts that endorsed this trade way more than a bunch of Columbus Blue Jackets fans that tell me that he can't skate. That's simple.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only thing I'd say, too, is that sometimes knowing where you're going makes you look faster. And I think that's probably what was lacking in his game in the past. And so the Wild have looked a lot faster when they're moving the puck efficiently, when their breakouts are clean, when their paths are direct, when that makes everybody look faster. And I think we're probably looking at a guy that, while confused in his own zone, looked even slower than he really is. And so I don't think, like, in my opinion, and I'm far from an expert, I don't look at him and think that guy will never play because of his skating. I don't think it's necessarily his strength, but I don't think it's his undoing.
But I also think, like, his stick handling on that one goal by Trenyan tells you the guy can move. I mean, he can, he when he is going forward, he looks like he could play the part. It's just there are areas of his game. He's a raw player. He's 21. He's coming over from the Czechia. He's a raw player that just needs to be coached here. But there's a reason why he's in his junior years was dominant and heads above all his counterparts, and why he was so good in World Juniors specifically.
He can shoot the puck.
Yeah, absolutely. So
all right, last
I think there's a
question.
lot there.
Do you think we're going to get a slight haircut on a Kirill deal simply because he's missed so much time and he's probably not going to be in contention for the Hart at the end of the year?
No, I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think if you get a haircut on it, like I think if I actually joked about this with somebody with the Wild the other day, that this might be the best thing for him to get him to sign, because I was actually I'm doing this giant agent poll, and I've talked to like 25 agents in the last couple of weeks, and we've talked a lot about Connor McDavid's contract and in comparison to with Leon Draisaitl, because a lot of us heard that Leon was going to go sign somewhere else as a UFA. But when all of a sudden somebody puts 14 million times 8 on the table, are you going to risk catastrophic injury and not sign? And I think that's the same thing with Kirill right now. It's like when all of a sudden the Wild throw 120 million on the table this summer, even if he's saying, it'd be kind of cool to play in Dallas or Chicago or Florida or New York or wherever, like when all of a sudden that money's sitting there, are you really going to say, yeah, but I'll sign it in a year? You're always one torn ACL away from everything changing. So I think this is a good wake-up call to him that, like, hey, especially if he has a chronic issue here, I might want to sign on the dotted line. I don't think it has anything to do with how he's not going to win the Hart. They know how incredible he is. The one issue that I will say that is a quandary that I'm going to talk to Gary Bettman about tomorrow, actually, is and teams are going to start, for the first time ever in about a month or two, they're going to announce the cap early, but they're not just going to give them 1 year. We're hearing they're going to give actually 1 or 2. And the big reason why is that right now, Colorado doesn't know what to do with Mikko Rantanen. Rantanen's sitting there and saying, well, Draisaitl signed for 14. They're saying, well, McKinnon makes this, but his agent's saying, well, the cap's going to be 110 in a year. So he's like, I'm not going to just sign for this. It's the same thing with McDavid and Kaprizov coming up in 2 years. If the cap is 110 million in 2 years, like, you can't just sign him now for 12 or 13 if 20% of the cap is X in 2 years. So I think that is the one issue that all these teams have to contend with right now. And I think that if that cap is 110 when Kaprizov's up, the Wild will be lucky to get Kaprizov at 15. That's just a fact.
Yeah. I think they will get a little bit of a haircut because, a haircut might not be the right term, but the number was going up, and he was going to be a $14 or $15 million a year player. If he had continued and led the league in scoring with 140 points and won the Hart, I'm not so sure that number wouldn't have bumped a little. So maybe they don't really get a haircut, but it probably stands status quo. But I think the point you made at the very beginning is the one that I keep coming back to, is the Wild can give him an extra year, and that extra year is a big deal when you're talking about this amount of money. Because if you say 8 years at 15 and that's 120, that means somebody else has to give 17 a year at 7 to make that number, maybe 17 and a quarter. I don't know exactly what the math would be, but it's a lot more. So the Wild have the ability to give him a bigger package than most teams elsewhere could match. And I think if you put that in front of him and say, do you really want to see if somebody else is going to go 17 and a half or 18 per at 7 years next year so that you can bump that number up? I just don't think it's worth it.
And the other thing is that I think Kirill's got to realize too, you can't get 20% of the cap if you want this team to continue to, he should see right now what this depth has been like during this pain year of Parise and Suter, pain years, and be like, well, you know what? I'm not really helping if all of a sudden I'm saying I want 20. So I think that's a big thing. It's same thing like Connor McDavid. I don't care what that cap ceiling is when he's a free agent. Let's just say it's 110. He's not going to take 20%. He should get 20%. He's worth every single penny. But he also knows that with Draisaitl at 14, him making 16 or 17, that they want to win cups. That's what his goal is. And so I think that he's going to realize that I got to take a little less to make sure that we could have a quality team around me. And I think Kirill's going to probably realize the same thing here. So, but I actually think the injury is a kind of a little stark reminder to him that, you know what, things can change, and you don't want to sit there and risk a year. We saw that with Marian Gaborik, right? He turned down $80 million here on an 8-year deal. 8 years. No, it was 10 years at 80, so $8 million a year. This is before you had term limits, and he turned it down. Gets hurt 3 games into the season playing sewer ball down in Florida. They call up Kyle Clutterbuck. He comes back. Then all of a sudden he has the hip surgery in December. Comes back after the trade deadline, and then boom, wanted the contract back. Chuck Fletcher at that point was the new GM, didn't give it to him. And then he, it worked out for him. He won a cup in LA, but he wound up going to New York and didn't get anywhere close to the money that he turned down with the Wild. And he was playing in New York, So a little different tax situation than Minnesota. Thank you. Yep. What else?
Well, it's hockey day.
Yeah,
week.
Talk
I'm
about
excited
that.
about that. I'm calling the first high school game down at Valley Fair. It's in the parking lot of Valley Fair, which I think will be kind of a cool setting. Are you going to get
an escort to the arena?
No, because I'm only doing one game this year. So that was in White Bear when I did 2 of the games and had the one right before the Wild game. So we had to ride in a police car downtown. But this one, I'm doing the first game. I've got Eden Prairie against Hibbing, which should be exciting. I'm always excited to be a part of the high school element of hockey day. Then we've got a Gopher women's game against Bemidji State, and then Maple Grove Shakopee in boys high school hockey. But I think our Gopher guys maybe are calling that, if I remember right. Sam Ekstrom and Gorgie and Ryan Carter are both going to be down there in some way. I don't know who's got which games, but I know Karts and Gorgie and I have the first game, the Eden Prairie Hibbing game. So my prep work all week has been because I'm helping with the prep for the other high school game too. But it's always exciting. I love that part of hockey day, and they're gonna have a couple rides open for the young kids at Valley Fair. So it should be kind of a cool setting down there. I'm excited about that.
What was your favorite hockey day setting? I remember the one at the airport in St. Paul, right? That was a cool one. But I haven't been to a ton.
Well, White Bear 2 years ago was really something, but it was different. They built almost like a hockey day village and had stuff going on there for 3 or 4 nights. Had a big tent that had live music in it each night that was for the 21 and older crowd, which was a new addition. I wasn't in Warroad last year, but I heard that was really good. Duluth had a great one right down on the waterfront. Stillwater was cool on the river. There have been some really good ones over the years.
It really is unreal what you guys. Yeah.
Mankato was a little bit more sterile because it was in the football stadium, but they had a great crowd and had a Division I men's game there, which was the first time they had that. Minnesota State played St. Thomas, so that was kind of cool to see. Well, that year was the year I slipped on the steps and broke my ribs during the game.
I remember that.
I was just telling that story. We had the trucks that have those old, the metal stairs that are. It was about 2 degrees that day, so there was a little layer of like light snow on them, and I slipped and fell. It's only about a 6-stair thing, but I slipped and fell and landed on my back. Lost my breath and walked up to the booth because the second period was about to start, and it was a girls' high school game. It was the first game of the day. I had a boys' game to follow. And Margot, who tends to critique my broadcast pretty closely, texted me because a goal happened, and she said, "You have got to at least pretend you're excited when there's a goal in the girls' game." And I texted her back. I said, "Margot, I can't even breathe right now. I think I have a broken rib." And she texted back like, "What?" I said, "I'll talk to you at intermission, but I can't argue with you about this right now." And so when the intermission happened, as soon as I go to break, my phone's lighting up, and it's Margot calling me like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I fell on the steps and I can't breathe. It's like I can't get my breath. Plus it's like 2 degrees, so it's a little tough to catch your breath anyway." And about a week later, I was in New York with the Wild, and my side was still killing me. And I went and saw the trainer, and sure enough, they took a picture. He says, well, you got a couple busted ribs. And I was like, well, that would explain why it hurts every time I cough.
First of all, I wish I saw it. That would have been delightful to me.
Yeah.
and videoed it. The other thing is, you are such an idiot. Like truly, like, you like to make fun of that I'm a hypochondriac. Like, you tear your ACL, you have no idea you did it. You're like, oh, that hurts. You broke your ribs, no idea that you broke your ribs. You had something on your back for years, didn't know that, oh, maybe I should go get that looked at. Like, what is wrong with you?
Well, apparently there's been a few things, but now nothing. I got everything fixed.
It's like, truly, like, sometimes you got to be a little bit of a hypochondriac.
Well, I wasn't expecting that I had broken ribs. I fell on my back and it was really cold. I just couldn't catch my breath. And when I tried to, say scores, I just didn't have any oomph. But then it was when we were in New York and I was riding in a cab, and all of a sudden I sneezed and I just tipped over in the back seat, and I really almost came to tears. I'm sure the cab driver was like, what in the world is wrong with this idiot? And the next morning I went to see the trainer and found out the ribs were broken. So that was, sometimes you find out.
One thing I was talking to Jack Capuano today, the Wild assistant coach. One thing I'll never want to get is kidney stones. Like, he was giving me a play-by-play of what he's endured here the last week. Holy moly. All of a sudden, they're panning you guys on FanDuel were panning the bench in Colorado. And I'm like, Jack Capuano is missing. I saw Pat Dwyer running the D, so I texted some people, and apparently he wasn't even on the road trip. So, all right, question. Mr. Notre Dame?
Pat Reese, pivoting from injury, your injury to the Wild's status. You guys
Mine are less serious to the club's success.
But at least in Joel Eriksson, in X case, it kind of feels like his ribs are getting broken every night.
That guy, by the way, like, I was basically chirping him in the locker room today. He's always playing hurt. And then today, you weren't at practice, were you?
No.
Today, he just goes into the corner, somehow hits an edge. And was anybody at practice today? This guy slammed into the corner boards, probably going 25 miles an hour. I'm just like, what is with you? Like, can you just go through one day of just not getting yourself in trouble? So
you had an interesting answer to a question in the mailbag about Eriksson Ek, Spurgeon, and Brodin.
Yeah.
And the quantity of games there.
Yeah, by the way, we figured this out.
Of games.
Remember our conversation last week of averaging? It is my numbers actually were pretty accurate. If you prorate 82 game seasons, how many of these guys miss a year? It's Spurgeon's about 16 and Brodin's about close to 20.
So in the case of Spurgeon and Brodin, and with what appears now, and again, as you mentioned earlier, it'll last for a few seconds and then it won't be that deep, but perhaps a deep array of defensemen, particularly as we look towards maybe next year. Do you foresee, in the case of Spurgeon, him playing out the full length of his contract? And maybe also in the case of Brodin, I don't have any scientific knowledge of this, but watching the other teams as a season ticket holder, it doesn't feel like there are guys that size playing a lot in the NHL right now in defense. As great as those two are and as effective as they are for their size, it feels to me like the trend in the game is towards bigger, perhaps more durable players.
Brodin's not small. He's definitely skinny, but he's, size-wise, he's probably 6'2", right? 6'2".
Yeah, and he's a sturdy guy.
I think we've discussed this a lot where, in the playoffs, this team doesn't have a lot of success. We always wonder why. But to answer your question, I do think they play it out. I don't think Spurgeon's ready to retire. When he's in the lineup, he's outstanding, at least in the regular season. I think at 35 years old, with his injury history and his contract, he's not easily tradable. And same thing, Brodin, he's always kind of be careful what you if you miss him, it's huge. So,
well, the only thing I'd say is that most of their injuries have not been the durability kind. Brodin got blocked a shot and broke his foot. That could happen to Brock Faber tomorrow. And that doesn't mean he's not durable. It just, Spurgeon got cheap shotted into the corner boards. Now they have had some where it's been a hit or something, but not all of them. And so I don't know that I'd be concerned about that. It's kind of interesting. It's one of Vinny's thoughts for today was, if you had to say right now, who are the Wild's 6 defensemen on opening night next year.
Next year. I mean, just one thing on your, like, I don't disagree with you that other teams, blue lines, like, you look at Florida, like the teams that are winning the cup are bigger, grittier, things like that. But the Wild have made their beds with their contracts, so you just got to fill out around them. That's why Bogosian, they look at as being somebody very valuable, why they gave Jake Middleton the extension. And Boyum isn't a very undersized guy, so there's going to be more coming, why they traded for Jake Jiricek. So I think that Bill Guerin recognizes sort of what you're saying, but he also is saying, like these guys are here to stay, so we got to work it around them.
And maybe the 7th and 8th, as you guys were stating in how great Merrill's been, they become even more important going forward as Spurgeon gets older.
Right now, if I had to guess on next year's thing,
say opening night, top
let's just
6.
say it's Middleton, Faber, Brodin, Spurgeon. I think they're 100% here.
Yep.
So now you have Bogosian that's going to be here. You have Jiricek that's probably making the team. So the question is, who's your other left shot D? Is it Zeev Buium? Are you re-signing Declan Chisholm? I don't know about that yet. My guess is actually not. That'd be the way I'd lean right now. So then I think you have to get another defenseman. So I do think that there's going to be, but I think that 6 year D are pretty much known right now.
Aquarius Home Services is your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water systems. I've had it in my house for years, and trust me, it's helped me eliminate all water hassles, which means softer skin, shiny fixtures, cleaner, softer laundry, and spot-free dishes, all with zero electricity. Connecticut provides worry-free water, peace of mind, no dials or timers to worry about, and it's amazing how little salt I use. Seriously, I've got like 10 bags in my garage if anybody wants any. Plus, under my sink, I have the K5 reverse osmosis water system for great tasting water and, most importantly, coffee, which, as everybody knows, is a must for any healthy sports writer. Right now, you can get up to 25% off a whole home system and start with a free water analysis today. Just go to AquariusHomeservices.com and you can schedule your free water analysis. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
We love supporting local businesses. We love working with local businesses. I started buying stuff at Twill in the Edina Galleria a long time ago. When I started this podcast network, I was really hoping I'd be able to work with Scott Dayton, the founder and owner of Twill, and I was lucky enough to be able to do so. Now my closet is pretty much all Twill stuff. I don't get free stuff. I don't get discounts. I don't ask for discounts. I go there and pay full freight because I want to support a local business, also because the stuff is awesome. Just bought a fresh batch. I'm about to go on a vacation with my wife. Everything I'm packing is Twill stuff because it wears well. It's comfortable. It doesn't wrinkle on planes. It doesn't wrinkle in suitcases. It comes out looking good. It wears like iron, and I'm never going to have to replace it. It's just so simple. Everything from from casual shoes to dressy shoes to golf stuff to dress stuff to suits. By the way, you get everything tailor fit, which really helps me out. And everything from gopher stuff to winter stuff to summer stuff. They just have everything. So go to twillmn.com, sign up for email updates. They won't send you anything unless they have a very specific event they want you to know about. They won't spam you. And go in there and say hello. Tell them we sent you. It's just a pleasant group of knowledgeable people. They are experts at what they do. It's the best men's clothing store in Minnesota. Go check out Twill online and in person in the Edina Galleria.
Want to keep the party going without the next day regrets? Well, say hello to Giggly THC Beverages, your new social sidekick for good vibes and an even better taste. No alcohol, no bad decisions. Just THC-infused cocktails, seltzers, and teas packed with natural ingredients and superfood extracts like ashwagandha and ginseng. Whether you're clinking cans at a backyard bash or just chilling with friends, Giggly's got you covered. Ditch the hangover, sip something smarter. You can find Giggly THC Beverages at over 500 locations, including Total Wine, MGM, Cub Foods, Top 10, and many more. And because we think you're going to love it, we're offering 50% off your first order with code GIGLY-NORTH. That's GIGLI North. Shop now at giggly.com. No alcohol, no hangover, just giggles.
So you think it'll be the third set you'd have be Jiricek and Bogosian on opening night?
No, well, that's what I mean. I think that if Jiricek is making the team, Bogosian's actually going to have to be your extra, and then you have a left shot D, maybe it's Boyum. Or do you go with Bogosian on his
Right.
offside.
So what's your call?
Yeah.
What's 5,
I would say
6?
it's Bogosian and Jiricek, because Bogosian is somebody that they're not just going to get rid of, and they're not going to not play.
All right, I'm going to say it's Boyum and Bogosian are the 5, 6 on opening night next year.
I think there's a lot of internal pressure to when you give up this type of thing
no
to
question.
put Jiricek on the team and not be the 7.
And that all could be true.
Yeah.
But this is my guess is that'll be your top 6. And then if Chisholm and Jiricek are your extra defensemen somehow, some way, I think you got a great defensive core.
Right.
I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah.
Back to Eriksson Ek. I read in another website today, he needs to change the way he plays. I think that's an unreasonable request to him. But what, if anything, can you envision for him for durability's sake as he starts to get older and remains obviously such a critical part of the Wild's identity?
Boy, I wouldn't want him to change anything about how he plays is why he's who he is. And I think what'll be really interesting right now is how does Eriksson Ek's game look for the next, let's say, 4 weeks, with now back with Matt Boldy? He's looked off playing without Boldy. We had the numbers the other night. When he and Boldy play together, their expected goals for is 72% for the season. When it's Ek without Boldy, it's like 52. When it's Boldy without Ek, it's under 50. But when they're together, it's 72. And so let's see what happens with their games here over the next few weeks. And I just think you got to just let him play as he plays. And if it means that he misses 8 games once a year, or maybe 12 games or whatever, because he gets cross-checked in the head that goes uncalled, I mean, what are you going to do? You got to let him play the way he plays.
I think the most interesting thing is how, as the years go on, his role might change. Like, as they get better up front, as Yurov comes, you have Rossi here if he's re-signed. They're going to probably sign Brock Nelson. Is he a center? Is he playing wing? Where does that eventually move Eriksson Ek to the third line if you have, say, Rossi and Yurov in front of him, or a Nelson playing on second or third line. So we'll have to see. I think that's more. He's never going to change the way he plays. But I do think
a third line guy that plays 18, 19 minutes a night, which is a lot for normal third liner.
And I just think his style of game, though, lends itself to he's going to be in pain for a lot of his years coming up. One thing I mentioned Rossi. One thing that's really interesting. So the Wild just had their all staff meetings. Out of town with their pro guys. And the one thing that I'm starting to kind of gather from talking to sources around is that I think they're going to start to, if it hasn't already begun, try to talk to Rossi's camp, not necessarily to re-sign him now, unless it's a no-brainer deal, but to try to figure out what he wants. And if it is going to be $8 or $9 million or something, on a long-term deal, that really could dictate his future, not necessarily in this season, but certainly this summer. If he's willing to take Matt Boldy's deal, which I can't see any way he would, if like he right now would take 7 times 7, we'll have a press conference tomorrow. But Boldy signed 7 times 7 2 years ago. As I've mentioned, like to me on a long-term deal, Dylan Cousins 7-1 is going to be the first thing out of his agent's mouth. So I think that's it. Or can you get him on a Byfield type bridge deal? I think all that's going to, they need to start to figure out, to plan their summer. What does he want? Is this something we can get done now if the price is right? Is this something we can get down right when the season's over? Or is this something we're going to have to entertain a trade? And that's sort of where they're at right now. But I get the impression that that was one of the discussions at their pro meetings. And I think that might be beginning where all of a sudden they reach out to his camp and try to ascertain what he wants.
I had no intention of coming up and asking a question until you mentioned that you were going to meet with Bettman in a few days.
He's at the Wild game tomorrow.
He is. Well, you can ask him. So it's a rule that has bothered me for the last 20 years as an old goaltender. That's the Brodeur rule. And that I think that if a goaltender has in his skill set the ability to skate, a stick handle, and move into the corner, I think he should be able to do that and to get rid of the trapezoid. And, I think they have the ability to do it. I think they have the ability to cover that. I know why it's there. I think that it's too easy to break the puck out against the defending team. But it just seems to me that rule now has come and gone.
Well, especially because now it seem like every team skates the puck into the offensive zone. Like the dump and chase game is largely gone. There are some teams that do it a ton. Toronto is like, I can't even believe what Berube is, how he's turned that team into a dump and chase team. But the reason why it was put in was because, and I covered those games. My God, they were horrific. Like I love Brodeur, but you covered a Florida New Jersey game back in the day, and the Panthers dumped the puck in, and Niedermeyer and Scott Stevens and Brian Rafalski didn't even retreat to get the puck because they knew that they would literally peel off to the high half wall and just wait for Brodeur to get it and send it out. And so they would stand up at the blue line, so you couldn't skate the puck in. You dump the puck, they wouldn't even go retreat because Brodeur was just breaking the puck out. You could not get any sort of forecheck against the Devils back in the day. And so I understand, and I liked them putting in the rule, but with the fact that teams have certainly changed the way they played, it might be something to talk about.
I like the rule just because it was one of the many that has been put in to increase the chance to score. And I don't know how exciting it is to go watch a goalie grab a puck in the corner. I mean, I love goaltenders, but there's more exciting things to watch in hockey.
Other than when Mike Smith used to go get it and then turn the puck over every other time. By the way, somebody remind me, we'll wait on this. We'll let you ask your question. But somebody asked me on Twitter to explain the hi, Kevin, that you do. I know why, but you could throw it out there. The hi, Kevin. Where's Kevin or whatever? Go for it.
Between Ohgren and Jiricek, which Wild rookie could realistically see playoff time if the Wild are healthy and make the playoffs this year? And also, is there any way Buium plays in the playoffs this year?
I mean,
there's a way.
Yeah. No, we didn't expect Faber to play in the Dallas series. He was supposed to play 2 games and then be scratched. And then he was so good against Nashville and Chicago that he wound up playing all 6 games in the playoffs and wasn't on the ice for a goal against, I might add, in a series where the Wild bled goals. If they're healthy, I mean,
I don't see how Jiricek plays if they're healthy, but I could see Ohgren potentially. But I think there's always a chance. I mean, if Buium signs at the end of the season, which we all kind of assume that he will, but we don't know exactly, that's not a done deal. And if he all of a sudden shows up and looks like everything that he looks right now at the college level, anything's possible.
Like let's just say that he plays the final 2 or 3 regular season games and plays on the number 1 power play, which is a really good chance, and he just lights it up, and the power play is dynamic. Absolutely. I mean, I would have him in the lineup over Declan Chisholm.
He certainly has the skating ability to do so.
Yeah.
The kid's unbelievable.
About 10 more minutes left in the show, so if you want to come on up, here's your chance to ask a question. We have still a bunch of garb up here, too. Otherwise, I'm going to have to mail it to people. Hi, Kevin.
Yeah, I don't know it. I don't even remember why I did it the first time, but it was started with the Seinfeld reference, like when Newman walks in and it's, hello, Newman. And I just started doing that with, hello, Kevin. And I don't know, it made the people in our truck laugh.
Does it have anything to do with that Newman was this annoying presence in the show and that Kevin is this?
Yes.
Really?
Exactly.
That's so
You should
mean.
ride on one of the team planes, and like Kevin sits 2 rows behind me, and I sit on the window seat on my side. He sits on the window on the other side, and it is non-stop with his following Game Center on his NFL. Oh, Broncos are 3rd and 7 on the 4. It's done. Game is done. It's over. Done. We're out. Done. I mean, and I throw in noise canceling earbuds as fast as I can. And Kevin's really a good friend of mine, as you guys have. I'm sure we've all heard the stories over the years. But I said it a couple times. And the truck people all started laughing. So then I just tried to do something a little different every night. Like, where is Kevin? And then one of them was like, hey, on Christmas time, you got to do the Home Alone, like, scream of Kevin like they did in the movie. So we threw that one in. So then it just kind of became a running joke to try to make him laugh by the way I throw it to him. And I don't know. I've had some fun with it. We'll see. I don't know how much longer it'll last. I'm running out of new ways to harass him.
Yeah. We'll find new ways.
Yep.
I got a question about contract negotiations and what's preventing NHL players, especially star players, from sacrificing $1 or $2 or $3 million and not feeling the need to be the highest paid player in the NHL or top 5 highest paid, taking that pay cut, allowing a team to sign a veteran player or a depth player in order to chase a cup if that's their main goal.
Yeah. I think it's easier said than done. I mean, everyone wants to make money. And when, like everybody's worth, like Connor McDavid should be the highest paid player in the league. You know, Nathan McKinnon's been supremely underpaid for a long time. But I hear you. I think what's going to be really interesting, I was talking to somebody about this today about Marco Rossi. Like, if I was any of these players right now, like, I would want short-term deals. Like, this cap looks like it's about to erupt in the next couple of years, especially when expansion comes in. So if you're Marco, wouldn't you bet on yourself and take a 3 or 4 year deal rather than 8 times 8? I would. And same thing, like right now, like, you don't think that Bill Guerin wishes that he signed Kirill Kaprizov to 8 years? But that 5 years,
he tried to sign it for 8 years. Kaprizov wouldn't.
Yeah, well, no, he was willing, but the number at that point was going to be like 11 or 12. Well, now, of course, they wish they did.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, and that, like when Boldy signed his deal, I remember saying, hey, by the time this deal is over, this is going to be the most team-friendly contract in the league.
Look at Eriksson Ek making 5.4 now with many years to go. I mean, so I think that's the bigger issue, and I have a feeling like to me, if I was a player this summer, with the cap going up, and you're a free agent, I'd want 1 or 2 years.
I think to your point, to the question though, is it's such it's just different worlds. I mean, to you or me, I think I could get by on $5 million instead of $6 million, but to these guys, it's just different. They've got a really short window of when they can make a ton of money, and not that. I mean, look, they've all got enough money to live forever if they so chose. And I just think right now, nobody's going to say, maybe the guy when it's Connor McDavid coming to the table and can I get 15 instead of 16 or 15 instead of 18? Yeah. But these guys that are signing the $7-8 million deals, they're trying to get every penny they can get right now because it might be their only big contract of their career.
And I will say the other pressure point here is that the NHLPA is very involved in this. You take it's like, selling your home. If you sell your home under market value, it affects your neighbor. And it's the same thing here. The higher you sign, now that helps the next player. The lower you sign, you might screw the next player. That's why Dylan Cousins making 7-1 is going to be really good for a lot of players and really bad for a lot of teams. And that's just the reality of it. The second Brock Faber got an $8.5 million extension, you don't think Cale Makar, who by the way has the same agent, is thinking, holy moly, I make 9. You think I'm now at 12, 13, maybe more. That's just the way it works. And so if all of a sudden, you're Connor McDavid and you're signing for the same price as Leon Draisaitl, there's going to be a lot of people ticked off about that. Agents, players. And players also, they talk about each other's salary. I was in the Carolina visiting locker room doing a bunch of stuff a couple of weeks ago. Not visiting locker room, home locker room when we were in Raleigh. And these guys, I'm in the locker room and I'm listening to them banter about a couple players on Florida and their salaries because they just came from Florida in a really emotional game. And it was just, I mean, they're talking like that guy's a $9 million, it's really interesting the way that players, wear that as a source of pride, Yeah. Good question though. But I think the NHLPA is the big thing here. Like it is.
And it's a little different in the NHL because there's a finite cap and most teams are spending, what would you say? I bet 30, maybe 28 of the 32 teams are within $4 or $5 million of the cap. So if it doesn't go to this guy, it's going to go to other players on the team. That's different than some of the other sports where if this guy, like in baseball, for example, where if this guy signs for 20, now it does affect everybody else because teams don't have a limit on what they can spend.
And this is still this league is still very gate driven. Like it just is, unlike a lot of the other sports where you have, where the NFL TV contract pays for every team's payroll, then you make everything as a bonus. And so I was talking to an agent about this the other day. He's like, if the cap goes to 110, how many teams, like, it's going to be very different. Now everybody's at the ceiling because they have no choice. But if it's 110, I think you're going to see a lot of internal budgets on a lot of teams. I just think that's the way it is.
Based on rumors around like at Twitter and social media, is a blockbuster trade for a player like Brock Nelson or JT Miller even possible given the current cap situation?
So Nelson wouldn't be a blockbuster, but Nelson they were always, I think, planning on trying to trade from this year. Now with their LTI situation, the fact they've spent 5 weeks now not accruing cap space because in a row, Middleton to Lauko to Kaprizov, I think it's going to be very hard for them to make a move at the deadline for a guy like Nelson unless they get a third party to eat salary or the Islanders take a chunk. Lou Lamoriello also has a history of letting guys walk. As I wrote the other day, see Zach Parise and a gazillion other guys. So he might not even trade him. The other thing is, I don't know, like if I'm the Wild, I don't even know how much I'd want to give up for Brock if I have a sense that he's going to sign with them for free in the summer. Like, why give up a first-round pick or a top prospect for a guy for 2 months that might not put you over the top when you can maybe sign him in the offseason? In terms of JT, they can't afford it in season. I don't see there's any way. Plus, I think he's going to be traded any minute. But if it happened this summer when the cap's going up, they absolutely would have that ability. But it probably would cost them Marco Rossi. So in other words, if Rossi wanted $8 or $9 million a year, then Bill Guerin's going to have to make a decision and say, all right, I know he's way younger and at the beginning of his career, but JT's, first of all, he's only 29. But to one other person's point when we were talking about the defenseman, like what doesn't put the Wild over the top sometimes in the playoffs? It's that big, nasty center. Not that JT's gigantic, but he plays a hard game. He also wins almost 60% of his draws. Like, maybe that's worth it because that he's signed for 5 more years at $8 million, 4 more after this year at $8 million. So is it worth getting that guy for $8 million and maybe trying to dangle a Rossi in that, or give Rossi the $8 million? And I think that's the type of thing. And that's why I just feel like they're trying to ascertain right now what Rossi's going to want this summer. And I think what Rossi is going to want is going to determine his future. If it's a reasonable contract in Bill Guerin's mind, I think they re-sign him, maybe even sooner than later. But if it's something like that, they might want to wait, see if JT plays out. I just know how much this organization loves him. I mean, heck, they put him on the Four Nations roster when he was still on personal leave. They obviously have a great, affinity for what he does. So.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. But I can't see it happening in season because, again, it's money. It's what Rossi's going to make in the future. Rossi right now is $1 million player. So, any other questions before we wrap up the show? None? Going once? Going twice? Wow. All right.
Sold.
You got to. It's a podcast, so you got to come up to the mic.
You're talking about expansion, and I just looked it up. That would put the NHL, the first league, to go more than 32 teams. Is there that much depth of talent? It felt like the last go-around that the Wild lost like so much that are we even an NHL team anymore after that expansion draft?
I think the short answer to that question is no. I don't think that there's a plethora of players out there, but it's going to happen anyway because the owners are going to make a ton of money from each one of these. You're talking about $1 billion for a franchise. That's $30 million for each owner.
And right now, unless in the next CBA negotiations they're talking about players getting a piece of this, that's purely to the owners splitting by 32, not going to any of the players. And I don't think it's just going to go to 34. I could see this thing going to 36 in 5 to 10 years as well. So, there's
some cities out there that are legitimate cities that are lining up. Arizona wants a team back. Houston, Atlanta. I mean, there are markets out there that
Quebec
that really are pushing hard to get it done. I think it's a no-brainer. It's at 34 within a couple of years, and 36 to me seems to make sense.
I talked to an agent the other day that for this thing I'm doing that is convinced that there's going to be 2 other expansion teams, Houston and say Atlanta, and that at some point Winnipeg's going to be sold back to Arizona. That the league wants to get there so much, and that Winnipeg's obviously struggling right now. All right, a couple more, then we'll wrap up.
How do you two feel about the Charlie Stramel pick in the 2023 draft, given his polarizing production over the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, he's playing really well this year. I mean, it was 23 points in 25 games. I mean, he's having a good year. He's
Against good teams, too.
Yeah, I
lately.
mean, 2 goals, 1 assist against Michigan the other day. I mean, look, obviously he's always going to be compared to Perreault, because we're assuming that the person that the Wild passed up in that draft, which they admitted to, we're assuming that it was Perreault, which I think it was. But, I mean, they drafted him for a reason, size, speed, all that stuff. And, he's going to be a project. I mean, they're going to eventually sign him. I don't think this year. I think he's going to go back. And then they'll sign him and then, give him time in the minors and try to develop him with their coaches and development guys. They're really uplifted by the way that he's played at Michigan State. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I haven't watched him enough myself to have an opinion, but his numbers sure look like he's headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
You just mentioned how you think Winnipeg might be going back to Arizona.
Well, that's what an agent told me. I mean,
I was going to say,
if I brought that
how
up to
likely
Kevin
do you think
tomorrow,
that
he'd have a
is,
heart attack.
being their rebirth was just so recent and with their success now?
Well, I mean, they play in the smallest rink in the league and still can't sell it out. It's tough right now up in Winnipeg economically, I just think that can't continue. They're going to have to figure it out. Prices to go to that game is super expensive right now. Just because they got to sort of overcharge to make their money because it's such a small rink. The other thing is the Canadian dollar is hovering around 70 cents. Like that is a problem.
Kind of how Bettman was fighting for Arizona State. You don't think there's something with that with Winnipeg?
Yeah. I mean, just real quick, like another thought of mine on the Canadian dollar is just imagine if you're Edmonton, who they are not starving for money. They pack a gigantic building, all that stuff. But just imagine you're paying Leon Draisaitl $14 million. Nurse 9, Bouchard's going to make a fortune or is, and now McDavid's going to want 18 or 19 or 17 or whatever it's going to be. And you're paying all that in U.S. funds, but taking in at your gate 67 cents on the dollar. It is so hard up there right now. Yeah. So I'm talking Edmonton in that one, but so I don't know. I mean, this is speculation from an agent. It's certainly
they're
not
concerned
informed.
about it though in Winnipeg.
No,
they were last year. I know that there were some big stories.
Chris Johnston,
he was doing the story when we were up there together, and I know they're worried about it. I don't know how precarious they are right now. I don't think they're like on the verge of going dark or anything, but they do have to figure it out. And that it's unfortunately the downtown area in Winnipeg is dying, and it's been more and more desolate the last couple times we've been up there. I don't think they've recovered from COVID particularly well. Hopefully it gets revitalized because I do think it's a market that will support a hockey team, and the fans that are there are into it and it's passionate, and it's kind of a fun rivalry for the Wild. Yeah, wouldn't necessarily be opposed to replacing Winnipeg with Phoenix on our travel schedule during the winter, but that's just my personal opinion.
And that's, I think, the issue with putting a second team in Toronto or Quebec as well. Quebec on par or maybe even smaller than Winnipeg is, again, the Canadian dollar is not helping anything. So right now, I don't think the league's going to be putting another team up in Canada anytime soon. Thanks to everybody for coming out here to Elsie's. Again, we got these giggly THC beverage coupons up here if you want, and you're 21 or over. So grab those. February 5th is our next live show at Splitrocks. That'll be coming up after the 5-game road trip that Anthony's on all of them. Yep. I'm only on one of them.
Really?
Yeah, I'm only going to Chicago, and Joe's on the rest, and I'm working on some Four
that's too
Nations
bad.
projects.
I know. That's a fun trip. We've got 2 off days in Boston.
I'll get my fix in Boston and Montreal coming up.
We're staying overnight after the game in Montreal and taking a train the next day to Ottawa. So that's actually a pretty good trip.
I know, but I got 7
nights in Toronto.
I got
Louis Nanny's on the trip.
I know. I'll see Louis. I think he's doing the Seattle-Vancouver trip, the trade deadline trip. But I got 7 days in Montreal and 5 in Boston coming up for the Four Nations. So I'll get my fix of that. Thanks to our incredible sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized driller for the Connecticut water treatment systems, heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, everything. And thanks for joining us in the Aquarius Home Services studio. Always seem to forget to mention that. Royal Credit Union, Twill in the Edina Galleria, Onyx Fish, Clamshell Beach Resorts, and Giggly THC Beverages. Thanks, everybody, for coming on to LCC on February 5th at Splitrocks.
So much coming out.